Next, I'm going to take a cloth and I'm just going to clean this hub out as best I can. Just get all the old dirt, grime, and grease out of there. Next, we're going to take our new bearing and we're going to press it back into the position where the old one was. So you want to be careful here. You don't want to hit this bearing with any kind of hard metal if you can at all avoid it. You want to try to use, if you have a kit like this, you can use, I think they're made of aluminum, which is a little bit of a softer metal, a piece of wood, anything else like that, just so you're not going to damage this bearing as you're putting it in there. Obviously that wouldn't be very good. And there you go. You just want to evenly push that seal back into the hub. So the next step is going to be to reinstall our snap ring. So the snap ring sits in a little ledge inside of the hub just above the bearing. So we're just going to press the snap ring. Oh, it let go. We're just going to compress it and then put it back in there. So our next step is going to be to replace the bearing seals. So these seals seal around the bearing inside of that hub, and they're just to keep the dirt and the water out and the grease in. And they don't do a fantastic job, but you definitely need them. So you'll notice that there's two sizes, one slightly smaller than the other. The smaller one is going to be on the inside of our hub. So the outside being where your tire is going to go, eventually out here. So you can put those in. There's a little spring in the inside here that you can see. That's the inside. It's kind of the inside of the cup. The outside you can see is kind of flush. So you're going to place that onto the hub and you're going to evenly push it down and then press it in with, you can use a hammer and something like you don't want to use a screwdriver or anything sharp that would perforate that seal. But you can use like some kind of a press tool like I've got here that I'm going to use. So once you've got your seal set in there, you're just going to give it a little tap in. And like I said, you don't want to kill it, you just want to seat it in there evenly. You just want it nicely seated in there up against the bearing, like that. Then we're going to go back to the, what I'll call the outside of your hub, where your wheel is eventually going to go. And we're going to do the same thing on the other side with our other seal. So again, you can see that little spring in there. We're going to set it in. And we're going to use our tool to press it in there. Now that we've replaced those seals, there is one more small seal we're going to replace. It's just on the inside of the other side of the hub here. So to get that out, you can probably just use a screwdriver down through the hole there and just hit right on the edge of that little ring. And there it goes. Once you've got that one out, we're just going to give it a little bit of a clean with a rag. And then we'll put our new seal in. So there's a little lip on the bottom of that. So that lip is going to be pointing down. So we'll just set that in there. And then so the same thing goes for the other seals. You're just going to kind of gently press them down as best you can. So I've just moved over to my vise here, just because the wooden table that I was using was kind of giving when I was hitting on it, or not transferring the energy right into the stroke. So I'm going to try on here a little bit, see if that works a little bit better. There you can see, went into place. Now that we have our steering knuckle reassembled, we're going to continue by putting everything back the way that we took it apart. So I'm going to start by removing the CV axle. You just have to kind of pull on it, pop it out of the transfer case there. So the CV axle, or the half shaft, depending on what you want to call it. I like to do that because I like to assemble the CV axle, your steering knuckle, and the disc all at once. So I'm going to push those together like that. I'm going to go ahead and reinstall the CD axle. I just find it goes in a little bit easier that way. Keep that disc brake up out of the way. And I'll start by putting in the lower ball joint into place. So just grab it here. Then we'll continue. So I'm going to put the nut back on our bottom ball joint there. I'm just going to start it off just so that it doesn't pop loose when we're trying to get everything done back up. Next, I'm just going to lift up on the lower control arm. Well, that ball joint just came loose, but I'll hold it in place as I bring down our upper control arm, put the upper ball joint back in, and start the nut on the bottom of that upper ball joint. And that's just so that it doesn't fall down and become disconnected when we're putting this all back together. We'll have to make sure to properly tighten those and put the cotter pins back in, but I'm just doing that to get us started off. Then we're going to go ahead and put our tie rod back in. And I'll just start to put that nut back on. Like that. Then I'm going to reinstall my shock. Now your quad may not have this piece here. That's just part of a lift kit that I've installed. So you'd be reinstalling this bolt here. So now that those are all in, we're going to start tightening them up. Next, I'm going to take my 17mm wrench and I'm going to start tightening up on this tie rod. Now, sometimes the tie rod and ball joint ends will spin. As you can see, that's kind of spinning there. So sometimes there'll be a bit of a flat side on either end of this tie rod that you can put another wrench on. So in this case, it's an 18mm. And you can hold the actual end of the tie rod as you tighten. That makes it snug. So if that ball joint continues to really give you grief and spin, you can put a pair of vice grips on top of it. You just gotta pull back the boot and put the vice grips on. I don't like to do that because you can cause damage to it, but sometimes if that ball joint just keeps spinning, you gotta do what you gotta do to get it on there. Next, go ahead and we'll tighten up that bottom ball joint. Another trick you can use if this ball joint is spinning is to put a pry bar on top and put a little pressure on it. And a lot of times that'll put enough pressure to stop the ball joint from spinning while you're turning the nut. Like that. Now we're going to go ahead and reinstall the brake. So if your brake piston has come out a little bit, you just need to take a screwdriver and just put it in there and just kind of squeeze the brake pads apart and push that piston back in. That's right in here, just so that it'll fit back over the rotor. Next, we're going to take our bolt for our caliper. We're going to put a little bit of anti-seize on it, just on the threads, just to keep it from getting all rusted and seized up. And then we're going to feed our bolts back through, like so, and tighten them up with our Allen key. Once we're done with that top one, we'll do the same with the bottom. Put a little bit of anti-seize on there. And we'll repeat that step. Before we move on any further, we need to make sure that we put cotter pins through the bottom of our upper ball joint, our lower ball joint, and our tie rod. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now, and I'll just show you how to do one, as they're all the same. Next, you need to make sure that the nut is high enough on the bolt that the cotter pin can get through the hole on the bolt, as well as if there's a crown nut, that it's aligned so that the hole is open so that the cotter pin can go through. So we'll take that cotter pin and we'll just slide it through like that. And then once you've slid it through, you just take a pair of I'm going to use needle nose pliers, and you just bend the two ends. Usually you try to bend one way and one the other way, like that. Next, we're going to put our crown nut back on the CV axle, or half shaft, depending on what you want to call it. And because there's no tire on there, I'm just going to use a pry bar to put a little bit of tension. As I gotta tighten this up, it'll apply a bit of pressure. Once that's nice and tight, make sure that your holes align there so that you can put your cotter pin through. After that, you're ready to put your tire back on. And your lug nuts. Once you get your lug nuts on, torque them all to 47 foot-pounds. And there you have it, a complete wheel bearing replacement on a 2008 Honda 4Trax Rincon 680FA. If this video helped you, please give it a like, and remember to subscribe to my channel. Thanks, and safe riding.